Hi everyone, and welcome back to Holy Humanist. First of all, I appreciate that this is a very weird format of a video. I also appreciate that it's not even a normal kind of like desk setup. So I hope you'll bear with me for it. I just really felt the need to comment on this talking point that has been in the news cycle before it leaves the news cycle without me giving my very, very basic 2 cents on it because I think it is a matter that it directly affects in my day-to-day life, and I've just always thought of it in this one way, and it's kind of weird how now people are trying to hijack something which was never theirs to begin with. But just before I get into it first, I'd like to apologize, as I said, for the format of this video, but also to each and every single one of you who have either followed my journey from the beginning or just reached out and checked in or been supportive and helped me in the kind of more recent situations I was in. Because as you all know, like I had spoken at a Tommy Robinson rally. If I, didn't agree with the fact that he was a racist, even though I may not agree with absolutely everything he says or does, I wholeheartedly believe he's not a racist. He can be many things, but not that. But clearly, me holding that stance was a stance too far for some people. Kind of the last few people that I had from my life before activism, if you will. That just kind of cemented the line of me taking a stance on the Gaza conflict and believing that Israel has the right to defend itself. I don't agree with certain boycotts and certain terms that are being used. Yes, I acknowledge a massive humanitarian disaster, but because my views are slightly differently aligned on certain very key subject matters, like Israel, obviously like Islam, and more recently like Tommy Robinson, um, I've had to just kind of, really step away from people that I truly love and care about. And you've all shown me that there is life on the other side of that. I knew that from before with people I'd spoken to from my activism, but to go through that yourself is quite like, an emotionally jarring process, and reality kind of hits you in the face. So, yeah, I really, really want to say thank you to everybody who's been there for me throughout this process. When things calm down, I will try and respond to each one of you individually because I think that's the least I can do. But I appreciate all the help and support so far. It really does mean the world to me. And I promise you, I will get settled and stronger and more vocal than ever because I think if there's one thing you've got in this life, it is your voice and your freedom of conscience. And I fled the Islamic world to use mine, and I intend to do that until my very last breath. So, yeah, thank you to each and every one of you. You know who you are. It means the world to me. Okay, so let's get on to this news item that I just really need to give my 2 cents on because I can't believe it's a thing. Shabana Mahmood insists on calling herself English, and Suena Braverman came back and said, no, you're British Asian, not English. And on this one, I've got to say, I'm 100% with Suella. She's completely right. Because let's be real, I've never once in my life gone around calling myself English. Like, that's never happened. Because why would I? It doesn't make any sense, nor has it ever to me. I am British Asian, sure. My heritage is Pashtun. My family's roots stretch back into Punjab and other parts of Pakistan. My dad came here as a toddler, and my mom was born here. But I grew up in a house where English, Punjabi, Urdu, and even some bits of Pashto was like the basic kind of lingua franca of the household. It wasn't like Cockney rhyming slang and tales about, dukes and Saxons, like, just wasn't. If anything, it was about their lives growing up in the streets of Lahore or tales that they had heard of their ancestors. So for me to suddenly say I'm English would be extremely silly. I know what I am. I'm British. That's my nationality because they suddenly dished out nationalities where you could become British. I didn't ask for it. It's just a thing. Obviously, the word British comes from Britain, which was part of the ethnicity, but let's just go with what we're dealing with currently. So, yes, I am British by virtue of my passport and my nationality, but I am Asian by virtue of my heritage. And those two things together obviously sum up why I am the way I am. But this is where the left, in my opinion, just completely lose the plot because they think that identity is like this fluffy costume you can just try on and mix and match and then have the audacity to scream racism if anyone dares to point out reality. They actually can't grasp the most basic concept of heritage and then an like add-on of a nationality. So Britons are from Britain, and English means English, which is an ethnicity. You can't just adopt that. You can't buy into that. And what I'm saying is not racist. It's not controversial. It's just common sense. It's geography, it's history, it's ontology, biology, and a big dose of honesty and reality. Some lefties clearly have a hard time grasping this very fact. But let me say this. Even the label British Asian as a tangential point, in my opinion, isn't one that I believe is fit for purpose because it lumps so many completely different communities into one basket. For example, British Asian as a term, as far as I've been growing up, has lumped in Pakistanis like myself, Sri Lankans, Indians, Bangladeshis, or with totally different languages, religions, histories, and yeah, even migration stories, like in their own right, and also into Britain. Yet the government and all the media love to kind of bundle us together as if we're one big block. South Asian. Obviously, Southeast Asian is a different ballgame, but all of the Indian subcontinent are apparently just British Asian. And it's not just inaccurate, sometimes it's downright unfair. Take the grooming gang scandal, for example. The vast majority of perpetrators, as we know, and I have said ad nauseum, were men of either British Pakistani or Pakistani Mirpuri descent. Yet the label British Asian got plastered across every newspaper headline, which meant that Indian, Sri Lankan, and Bangladeshi communities were suddenly dragged into a crime that they effectively had no part in. That's what really bothers me for them, to be honest. I'll own it as a British Pakistani that this community needs work. But for the rest of South Asian immigrants or descendants, I feel like it's not just lazy journalism, it's highly damaging, where everybody is punished for the crimes of one specific ethnicity. So, yes, I use the term British Asian because that's the like standard category that we've been handed ever since I was born, as I said, in this country. I'd always have to just tick a box to say British Asian. But personally, I think we need more honesty and more precision when it comes to delineating between these various South Asian ethnicities. And I genuinely do believe that the British Sikhs and the British Hindus and the British Tamils, etc., will probably agree with me because identities aren't interchangeable. So if we want to deal with community issues seriously, then we have to call them what they are and not blur them into this one size fits all Asian box, South Asian or British Asian, what have you. Anyhow, that's a separate debate, but it matters. And I'll probably go into this at some point in a more detailed video. But here's the crazy thing about what Shabana Mahmood was doing by claiming her Englishness. Being not English and just whatever she is, a Brahmi of South Asian, specifically Pakistani descent, doesn't make her less British. It doesn't exclude her. It doesn't insult her belonging. It just means that you respect what words actually mean. So I don't need to borrow the label English to validate myself. I'm perfectly proud of being British while also celebrating being Pashtun on certain levels and being proud of my Punjabi culture on certain levels and proud of the languages and traditions and food and culture and music and fashion that filled my home growing up. That's richness. And I feel like that's heritage. Why erase it just to pretend or adopt or take away from what it means to be English for English people and their history and their food and their culture and their clothes? So it really irks me, and apologizes why I had to make this video, but it really irks me when Shabana Mahmood insists that I'm English and then she gets upset when she's corrected. It doesn't look empowering. It just looks extremely insecure. And I really respect Suella Braverman for saying it plainly, and she always has. She always mentions that she's British, not English, because you are British Asian. You're not English. I'm British Asian, and that's the truth. And honestly speaking, the left's meltdown over that, like one kind of terminology and trying to erase an entire ethnicity, shows you just how far common sense has fallen. They acknowledge that heritage is some kind of crime. No, this is actually called being accurate. It's called telling the truth, and it's called acknowledging reality. So the truth is, I'm British Asian. I'm Pashtun by blood. My family is also Punjabi and proud because they were settled there for generations. And I'm definitely not English. And that's perfectly fine because this British umbrella of a nationality we've been told to adopt is enough. And I don't need to go above and beyond that. And genuinely, the fact that I even have to state this in a video, and the fact that this is a talking point on the news, and it has been for a while, which is why I've kept quiet, but I thought now is the time to just address this, is because it's not rocket science. It's very basic. And the fact that I know who I am and Shabana Mahmood doesn't, given her current position at one of the highest levels of government, is extremely worrying. So I am the sum of my parts. Part of me is British, part of me is Pashtun, part of me is Punjabi, and part of me is even European, with all the places I've lived and traveled and my mindset. So I just think to try and take away the English ethnicity from actual English people is extremely disingenuous to what you're trying to do and to English people who are trying to maintain a decorum of their identity, given how fast it's changing in this country. I just think the best thing that you can do, even like I'm a third generation immigrant into the UK, and I always label myself as a British Pakistani. So when somebody approaches me and they ask me where I'm from, I genuinely answer with, because I've also lived in so many different countries around the world, and I grew up in the Middle East, and I lived in Southeast Asia. And when I came back here, I always genuinely have to ask them, like, do you want the long version or the short version? And even in the short version, there is never a time where I say I'm English. I will always say I'm British Pakistani and like hold an English passport, but I will never jump in the bandwagon onto that ethnicity. And even in the long version of the answer I give people, I always explain that I am a third generation British Pakistani. So I was born in London, but da 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 da. And I mean, a lot of people say, oh, it's, the color of your skin delineates that. It's not even to do with the color of your skin, because you have Europeans that look like English people for all intents and purposes, but they're not English. And on the flip side, you've got Europeans who don't think like English people, whereas I think a lot more like an English person by virtue of being British. So it's very basic, but there's a little tiny nuance in there, which I think that a lot of people on the left, including Shabana Mahmood, seem to understand. But I hope that makes sense coming from somebody like me, who is a third generation British Asian, despite how much I hate that term, but definitely not an English person, with potentially an English perspective on the world, but also still very much a British mindset. So those two things you could argue at some level are interchangeable, but again, let's not hijack, or I feel like nobody should even dare to have the audacity to hijack the English ethnicity in the same way that I wouldn't expect somebody from China or somebody from France or where have you come and try and culturally assimilate in terms of their heritage to try and be Pakistani or Punjabi or Pashtun when clearly they aren't. More and more British Asians come out and say, I'm not English, I am British Asian. And for now, I guess that will have to do as a subcategory, but I think we've got a lot of work to do within that category itself. But by and large, I'm not English, nor do I claim to be, nor will I ever be. And I think people like Shabana Mahmood need to come to terms with that, especially because she's in a position of power in government and she represents the UK on the wider global stage. So let's learn basic facts, please, Shabana. And lastly, let's not forget this isn't just about labels or heritage or ethnicity or being English. Shabana, but all of her claims in being English and Burmese and what have you, has also openly said on multiple occasions that her religious duties sit side by side with her loyalty to Britain. I'm sorry, but that's exactly why people roll their eyes is at this whole I'm English claim. Because Englishness, and I'll go out on a limb here and say Britishness, but let's stick with Englishness, is not just geography. They're a civic culture. They're an ancient culture, all about putting this country first in ways that you can't imagine because your dual identity of being a Muslim or following Islam means that you are supposed to put Islam first. You are, according to Islam, at war with Britain, which is an infidel country, not on the right path, if you follow Islam correctly and truly know your religion, or you aren't trying to deceive non-Muslims by saying that. Now, I will add in the caveat that I'm not sure if Shabana Mahmood has read Islam to the extent where she knows about this Darul Harb and Darul Islam situation, and she might just be speaking from a place of a very liberal laywoman's type of Islam, which is, very much what you make it. But according to real Islam, Britain cannot be her adopted home in the way that she claims. That's what I'm saying here. So, for example, in Shabana Mahmood's case, if she puts her faith side by side with her loyalty, it's like putting this outdated Arabic-based faith on the same pedestal as your duty to Britain. Then all I can say is, please don't be surprised when people question, and rightly so, how genuine that claim to Englishness really is. Because, first of all, you're not English. And sorry, Shabana, but using the age-old Abrahamic faith closeness that Islam may or may not have, definitely doesn't have, to Judaism and Christianity won't cut it either. According to official UK figures, about 67% of recent terrorist attacks were Islamist in nature, and roughly 3/4 of MI5's counterterrorism investigation involve Islamists. That's the government's own data, the government that you represent. The majority are Islamists, not the racists or the far-right thugs that Shabana likes to fearmonger about ad nauseum. So no, Islam is nothing like the other Abrahamic faiths. I don't see people blowing themselves up in the name of Allah Akbar because of their Christian faith or their Judaic faith, causing incidents like 7/7 and worse. Sorry, Shabana, take the L's. Firstly, you're not English, and second of all, you're a disingenuous or naive Muslim at best. I didn't mean for this to be an entire critique on one woman in government, but I'm sorry, I just didn't want this to pass through the news cycle without me giving my 2 cents, because I feel like something as basic as this should be common knowledge to most people, but I've heard segments of the news discuss this for, a couple of hours too many. And I just don't think we need to be giving something so basic so much airtime. We should just move on from the fact, accept reality, and, call a spade wherever we can. So that was just my 2 cents in trying to say that I am on the side of reason and common sense and biology and ontology and every other metric you use to measure how much idiocracy surrounds this conversation. I hope that being a third generation British Asian has helped other people realize the fact that this is a very simple issue to work around. It's very easy for me to sit back and say I'm not English, I won't pretend to be English, and I don't intend to ever try and adopt being English or Englishness. And I think the quicker people like Shabana Mahmood could learn that, the better. Having said that, once again, I'm very, very grateful to absolutely everybody, including English people and including this country of England, which I do call home. I've known no other country besides it to be my home, for all the freedoms that you've given me and enshrined in the fabric of this society and into our minds. So I intend to use those freedoms in every possible way I can, and I don't intend for anything to stand in my way in the meantime. So on that note, I bid you all good night, and once again, thank you so much for all the love and support and genuine empathy and reassurance that you've all shown me over the past week. I cannot tell you how much it means to me. And as promised, I will be back very soon with my video on the differences between some aspects of Islam and Christianity and what inspired it, which was actually a TV show that I had finished watching about 2 weeks ago. Funnily enough, on the beginnings of modern England as we know it. So yeah, if anyone hasn't watched King and Conqueror on BBC, it's one show I'd very much highly recommend by the BBC. But my next video will be inspired by my thoughts after watching that. So please stay tuned, and hopefully I will have my setup all ready by then, so you won't kind of see me in this weird limbo state. But until then, ta-da, please look after yourself and stay free and stay latched firmly onto reality. Bye everyone, take care.
If you like these videos and want to support me in my activism, then you can support me on Patreon or PayPal. Stay free, everyone.